Now we're going to move on to the new section of the show, which was formerly their own videos, but now we are going to venture into classic movie reviews, where Ryan and I review a movie that we consider a classic. What's a classic to us? That is a movie that is in high critical standing, has a good following of fans, and came out at least 25 years ago. Ryan, what movie did we review this time?
Young Frankenstein.
Mel Brooks' comedic masterpiece, Young Frankenstein.
Frankenstein, that's what it is.
This is one of my all-time favorite comedies. It might be my favorite comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I love this film. Let's just dive deep right into it and go off and start right away. One of the best things about this movie is Gene Wilder's lead performance as Dr. Frankenstein, as he likes to put it. I love that he kind of gives a very serious performance, and he can kind of drift from being really dramatic and serious to very funny on a dime, like it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an easy thing to do, and I think he does an excellent job of doing it. I really enjoy Marty Feldman as Igor, and and the dynamic between the three leads, between Frankenstein, Igor, and Inka. The actress's name who plays her is leaving me right now, but their dynamic works so well throughout the movie, and every time they're on screen together, you know some hijinks is about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that this film, with most comedies that I really love, this was a good movie first, and then it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
You could take the comedy out of this movie and still have a great story with a great character arc about what's going on. And I also love that this movie is both a spoof of Frankenstein and a sequel to it. Like, they acknowledge the events of the classic Frankenstein as, like, happening before. And Bride of Frankenstein, to that matter.
And they really showcase that when they're having their town hall meeting, because they're like, no, we've had a Frankenstein here before. Like, we're not going to do this all over again. And it's a very, like, it's one of the more serious moments of the film until the inspector shows up, which adds the comedic element to it, which goes to show what you were saying about it being a good movie and then a good comedy, because that is a good moment where the characters are like, no, like, we got to get rid of him, we got to stop him from creating this monster, and then the comedy rolls in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm going to go grab my notes from my notepad that I left in the other room, so go ahead and start talking about things that you enjoy about this film.
Well, like you were saying about it, about Gene Wilder's performance being serious while having comedic lines and comedic moments, a scene that really stands out to me is whenever the creature comes down after being shocked by lightning, and Gene Wilder is trying to, like, resurrect him, and it's a very serious moment that he wants this creature to come to life, and he, like, turns around to walk away, and then he comes back and, like, chokes, and he's like, oh, you son of a bitch, and starts, like, hitting him, and that's the comedic part of it, but he's giving a very serious performance.
Oh yeah, no, like, you really feel, when this movie is going on, you really root for this guy to, like, achieve the goals that he wants, because when the movie starts, he's very distant of his family, doesn't want anything to do with his family.
So much so, even the pronunciation of his family name.
Yeah, it's Frankenstein. He doesn't want to be even referred to as Frankenstein. And something that you brought up during the movie, and so I want you to talk about it more, is how his grandfather's philosophy, the original, like, Dr. Frankenstein, was of reanimating dead things, and his philosophy is the preservation of things that are already alive, and how they're actually the same philosophy. And when he realizes that is when he's obviously given the family house in the will, is when he decides to continue that legacy, when he kind of comes to the conclusion that they're the same philosophy. So go ahead and dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's actually very fascinating, because I didn't catch that the first time. Obviously, he's like, I'm not, like, whenever he's teaching his class, he's like, I'm not interested in dead things, I'm interested in the preservation of life. So he actually tells you what he's, studying. He
tells you his desires and what he loves.
And whenever he gets to the house, and he's like, his first interest is actually finding his grandfather's secret library, because obviously he knows his family history about how his grandfather would reanimate dead things. So he wanted to find this and kind of see where his studies would go. And then internally he realizes that, like, if he resurrects something, he is preserving life, because he is making life immortal. He's making people immortal and live forever. And that is the preservation of life, which goes hand in hand with his grandfather's philosophy of resurrecting the dead. Although they had two different visions on the same point, it is essentially the same thing, which I think ties greatly into it being a sequel as well to the original Frankenstein movie. And it was just so fascinating watching that, because, again, you don't really realize that until he's like, really studying like what's the book called, like How I Did It by
Yeah.
Victor Frankenstein.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like even reading it while they're eating dinner, and he's like more interested in that rather than eating, because he's just like, this is how I preserve life, this is how I make people live forever. And even whenever he gives his presentation, he's like, I have found a way to make life immortal for us to live forever, because he is preserving life. And I just found that to be so fascinating.
And you get these deep thematic things with one of the funniest fucking movies ever made.
Yeah.
Like, the comedy in this movie is very much like Monty Python level comedy. Like, that style of humor. And I kind of want to go into talk about like specific bits in the movie, because I probably won't do clips since it's part of the podcast and audio. I don't want people driving in the car and suddenly this clip plays and I'm like, damn it. But
Damn your eye.
Too late.
Too late.
God, great segue. But got so many bits, especially with the Igor character. Like, I love when they first meet and Igor's like, you must be Dr. Frankenstein. And he goes, Frankenstein. And he goes, oh, they told me it was Frankenstein. And he goes, no, you must be Igor. And he goes, actually, it's Igor. And like does that, but then he's referred to as Igor for the rest of the movie. And I love how there's also callbacks in the movie. Like, I love how when Dr. Frankenstein tells him his name is Frankenstein, Igor's like, oh, so then is your first name Frodrick? And he goes, no, it's Frederick. And he goes, well, why isn't it Frodrick Frankenstein? And he goes, because it's Frederick Frankenstein. And he goes, okay. And then later in the movie, he scares Dr. Frankenstein, and then he goes, Igor, and then he goes, Frodrick. And it's so damn funny. And for any Aerosmith fans, a fun fact about this movie, there's a great comedic bit where Igor is walking downstairs with a cane, and he says, walk this way, and like walk a certain way, and then instructs Gene Wilder's character to do the same thing. And he like copies him. And then Aerosmith used that scene as the inspiration for their song, Walk This Way. Just a little fun fact about the movie.
And then later,
there.
Run DMC, which I think their version is much better.
Oh, we can fight about that at some other time. But, just the comedy in this movie, like I said, like, what, knockers? Oh, thank you, doctor. And, like, people who haven't seen it are going to be like, what the fuck are they talking about?
Yeah.
I promise you, please watch Young Frankenstein. It's one of the funniest movies ever made. But were there any bits in the movie that just particularly, tickle your feather?
Definitely the running joke of his hump or his hunch or
Yes.
whatever it is, like, because he shows up and he's like, he taps Igor on the back and he's like, oh, I don't mean to offend you, but I am an excellent surgeon. And he goes, what hump are you talking about? And then later on, Frodrick Frankenstein is like, oh, I thought your hump was on the other side. What? What hump? And he just doesn't even realize it and just dismisses it, which I think is absolutely hilarious.
They just keep switching the sides of the hump. And I also like that Igor will break the fourth wall a lot. Like, after he does that, like, what hump are you talking about? And like, the guy walks away. He looks in the camera and he's like, and then, like, keeps going. It's so funny.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do think Igor is the funniest character in this movie, especially whenever they're riding back to the castle and there's wolves howling in the distance. And I can't remember the girl's name, but she goes, werewolves. They're a wolf. Their castle. Why are you talking like that? I thought you wanted to. No, I don't.
Suit yourself. I'm easy.
Oh, what a fantastic bit.
Such a great bit. And I also love the bit with Gene Wilder's with Dr. Frankenstein and with Inca when the candle bit, when they're trying to get to the secret library and they keep lifting the candle, the door keeps spinning and they're just trying to figure out like how the hell to get it to stop. That was great. I love the when the Frankenstein monster gets about, and they actually spoof scenes from past Frankenstein movies, like the scene in just the Frankenstein story, like the scene where the monster meets the little girl, and where in the movie he accidentally kills the little girl. In this, they go on a seesaw, and the parents are in the house looking for the little girl, and they can't find her, and they're freaking out. And then he sits on the seesaw, and she just fucking yeets into her bedroom, and the parents open the door like, oh, thank God you're here. And they also spoof a scene from The Bride of Frankenstein with Gene Hackman playing the blind man who like lets Frankenstein in. And in The Bride of Frankenstein, which ironically is also a comedic kind of movie, in that movie, the scene that's like the heart of the movie, the serious scene where this blind person doesn't know that the monster is like this horrific thing and like treats him like a normal person. But in this movie, he's like spilling soup on his lap and trying to do all this, and at the end he's like, where are you going? I was gonna make espresso. Like, fucking such a good spoof bit of that.
I definitely want to go back to the scene where you're saying like Frankenstein, the creature meets the little girl, because they know that it's a spoof. So they're throwing like a clover or something in the well.
Yeah.
And the girl's like, oh, like what else can we find to throw in the well? And the camera slowly zooms on the creature's face, and he just like looks at the camera, and it's like, okay, like that you're a spoof, and it's like you said, it's a great movie and a funny movie.
And from the audience perspective, if you've seen Frankenstein and you see the little girl by the well, you're like, oh, how are they gonna handle this one?
And it's fantastic with their humor, and they don't overdo it, because it's like it'll have like serious moments and then funny moments to end it, and then a serious moment and then a funny moment,
and then sometimes it'll be funny, and then serious. And like especially towards like the second act of the movie is like all comedy, and it's so funny. Oh, the bit with Fire Blunka, where every time they say her name, horses fucking go off, even when they're like across the city. So great. But it's this great movie.
But do you have any negatives? Because that is what I find interesting, is negatives about a movie.
The only negative that really digs me about this movie, because like you can nitpick this movie a little bit, because some of the, for the most part, the blocking is really well done and the acting is well done, but you can tell sometimes they're just over exaggerating to like propel a scene forward. But I think the only major problem that I have is I think you can take off like 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Now, you couldn't just take a 15-minute section out. You have to take out sections from here or there, because like it's a pretty welly tight-knit movie. But around towards the beginning of the third act, you kind of start to be like, okay, I'm ready for this to wrap up. And I love this movie. It's one of my favorite comedies, but that's the only like major problem that I have. But I think there are so many pros about this movie that for that to be the only con for me doesn't really take me out of it all that much.
Honestly, I do have to piggyback off what you said. Young Frankenstein, does feel a little long. I don't know if I can just pinpoint it to a specific moment, like you said, just like pick it out here and there that time needs to come out. But definitely towards the middle, towards the end, I was really starting to feel the length of this movie, and it's not even that long. It's like an hour and 45.
Hour 40, yeah.
Something along the lines of that, which is like short for today's movie standards, but it feels like it's long, and I don't know whether it's like the story that's losing me or just what about it, but I'd have to say the biggest negative, and probably the only negative I can think about this movie, is that it does feel long.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that, but what I know we have different rating systems. What would your kind of overall grade be of the movie?
Probably a 4. I'd sit at 4 stars out of 5.
Okay.
What about you?
You know, it does have that one flaw of it just kind of being a little overly long, or the correct way to say, some pacing issues. But a 97 out of 100 is still an A+, my man. It is. This is one of my all-time favorite comedies, and I just think there are so many pros that one little con only dips it that much. So I'm going to give Young Frankenstein an A+. I've given out a lot recently. I don't normally do that, but...
Which we're just on a great track, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, Jaws, E.T., Young Frankenstein, fucking... What are you going to do?
Yeah. What the fuck are you going to do?
Yeah. But yeah, no, great stuff.
Absolutely.